when I have to remind Joe that I'm very loud talking, even though we tested the mics ahead of time. I get really excited for those first couple of words, so thank you, Joe. Welcome to Sense of Place Season 11. It's great to have you guys here. It's great to have folks tuning in on our live stream from all over the place. My name is Sarah Fox. I'm the host and curator of Sense of Place. And tonight is a really special night. We're going to get to more of why that is in a second. But I want to let you guys know, especially if you're new to Sense of Place, this is our 13th season. So thank you. I only get credit for the last handful. Amanda Lawrence, our founder, had the good idea many years ago. Yep. What I said in the first lecture this season is that I hoped we would be your favorite teenager, so I hope we've lived up to that this season. But in 13 seasons, we have had nearly 100 different speakers talk on a variety of topics, from vegan revolutions to wildfire to debris slides, the Rajneesh, community health workers, native bee populations. This season alone, we started off with a lecture on the Pacific lamprey, which some of you maybe were here for. And not only did we get to learn about the lamprey, but the guest brought live lamprey. Some of you may have gotten to have them suck on your arm. We had a little boy who was maybe 5, who we have a photo of. He was so brave. He just put his arm up like that. That speaker also had a rap about lamprey. Kat, I don't think is going to rap tonight, but if she goes for it, we'll accept it. And then we'll be ending with volcanoes and lava next month. So 13 seasons, a lot of people, a lot of amazing topics. And the goal of Sense of Place has always been to tap into the curiosity about this place as a way to bring people from all different backgrounds and interests together. And that's all of you. So I'm glad to have you here. Tonight, we are going to be hearing from someone who has knowledge of this place in a way no one else does. That's Kat Brigham. But before we get to her, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. We have many sponsors who've been with us for all 13 seasons. We, tonight, are actually featuring chairs from Dog River Coffee, one of our sponsors. Thank you. Thank you, Nate, wherever you are. Thank you to the customer who I kicked out of one as I took it this afternoon. We're also really grateful to be a program of Mount Adams Institute, which some of you guys know is a local nonprofit that does great work here locally, but also nationally. Our executive director and our program director right now are in DC looking and working with the AmeriCorps program. So a great organization to be a part of. They share the ethic of how do we connect people to our natural world? And they do it in a variety of different ways, through AmeriCorps programs, through programs like this, and for those of you who have kids, through summer camp, new back this season, and that opens on March 10th. I know for those of you who have kids, finding summer camp can be treacherous, so March 10th, get your computer turned on. So the way that it's going to work tonight is Kat's going to join me here for a conversation, and we'll have some photos, we may have some other stuff, and when we're done, it's going to be a time for questions. So as we go along, if something comes up and you don't understand it, or you wonder what we're talking about, or you have knowledge beyond what I have and can ask her about something, please log that in your head and ask at the end. And now I just want to take a minute. First of all, drink water because I have dry mouth here, because I've been laughing with Kat in the green room. I want to just tell you personally how this night came about. Where's, hi. You guys are going to give me so much shit for this afterwards, aren't you? I know, I did too. God, okay, we're stopping.
I'm leaving.
Okay. I know, I'm sorry. So five or six years ago, I was hired to produce a podcast, a specific story on tribal fishing in the gorge. for the podcast here in the Gorge, which I hope some of you guys will have listened to. And that episode on tribal fishing was actually based on a sense of place lecture, which was really great. Paul Lumley, who some of you may know, he's from Yakama Nation, presented, and then I got to sort of take that topic and run with it. And so in the process of doing research for that topic, I got to talk with a lot of amazing tribal leaders from the Gorge. Paul Lumley was one of them, Johnny Jackson, Wilbur Schlockish, and then I walked into the Brigham Fish Market in Cascade Locks, and I walked to the counter and said, I'd sort of been stalking them. I knew there was some sisters there, and I said, is Terry or Kim here? And they said, well, Kim doesn't want to talk to you, but Terry will come out. And I learned that Kim will talk to me, but she's not the one that's going to talk to strangers like that, although I now force her to. And so Terry came out, and I sort of gave her my quick spiel, like, this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm trying to, like, not make her say no. I want her to say yes. And I just say, this is what I'm doing. Can I talk to you more about it? And she made the mistake of agreeing and gave me her phone number, which I will tell you is not that helpful since she refuses to set up her voicemail. Yup. And so we spent a long time trying to connect, and we finally connected. And Terry became the main character of that story and really the heart of that story, and one perspective into a much larger important piece of our history, and a good friend. And in the process of getting to know Terry, that is when I first heard about Kat, her mom. And I thought, what is it with these Brigham women? They're just a bunch of powerful ladies. So Kat is the Confederated Tribe of the Umatilla Indian Reservation board chair. We're going to learn more about that and what that means. She also was recently appointed by Deb Haaland, Secretary for the Department of the Interior, as one of 24 if you include their partners, appointees to the first ever Tribal Advisory Council to the Department of the Interior, which I think is a big deal. So, yeah. Kat is representing the Northwest as part of that. And technically, that's, she's representing the Northwest Bureau of Indian Affairs region. But I think what we'll learn tonight is that that work and representing the Northwest and representing the natural place, it affects the tribes, but it also affects all of us. So in a way, I feel like she's representing me. So a big part of why I wanted Kat to come tonight and to talk more about her work was to broaden what we understand about the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. And just because that's a mouthful, I'm going to say Umatilla. I may reduce it, but that's important for me that we know that's the full name. I want us to understand more about that particular group, and also because I feel like a lot of times tribal culture gets presented always in sort of a historical context and not contemporary. And I think that's not at all to slight the contemporary. I think that's understandable, but I would love to learn more about what's going on currently and to balance out and add to the really important historical piece. So you're going to hear both sides of it tonight. And part of the reason I'm interested in the contemporary piece, and I hope that you are as well, is that we have a sovereign nation next door. And that's a really unique situation. And I want to know what are the challenges and successes and experiences of being a part of that nation. I hope we'll have future events where leaders from other tribes will join us and give us perspective as they see it too. So some of what you're going to learn tonight is going to be different from your own experience. And frankly, I think that's why Sense of Place is so great. I love that for one night every month, we have the chance to hopefully step a little bit into someone else's shoes and try to understand the world from their perspective. But I also think that at some point tonight, there's going to come a time, there's going to be something said where a moment or experience from Kat's very complex Venn diagram of who she is going to overlap with the Venn diagram of every one of you. And I hope that you notice that moment as well. So not just the moments where we're different and have different experiences, but those moments of overlap. I really feel like in that moment, in that glimpse of commonality, that is where lies the greatest opportunity. For me, and I hope for all of you guys, that is the superpower of things like tonight, and I hope for you of sense of place. That's more personal than I usually get. Thank you for listening. It means a lot to me to have you guys here tonight and to let me say that. Not that you guys had any choice. I recognize that too. I also recognize that the Brigham women are going to give me a lot of hell backstage tonight after for getting all mushy. So, but with that, that's true. You owe me already. So I've only begun to get to know Kat. I'm really excited to learn more about her tonight, and I'm really excited to have all of you guys here to do it along with me. So I hope you'll join me in welcoming Kat Brigham to Sense of Place Season 13. Come on.
Well, thank you.
God, what happened to me?
I don't know. I said, well, if I'd have known if it was the 13th year, I would have waited till next year. It's a good thing I'm not so superstitious.
I ruined it from the beginning. Oh. All right, we got to log in here. Before we even get started, you told a story in the green room that I really liked. Do you mind telling it again?
All about the race?
Yeah.
Oh. Well,
was that a sigh?
Well, I was just letting her know that, there was when our animals could talk to each other, there was a discussion between a sturgeon and an elk. They were talking about who was fastest, and they decided to have a race. And so they sectioned off the race area, and then they said, okay, if I win, what do I get? And they said, a part of me. So if the elk won, they would get a part of the sturgeon, and if the sturgeon won, they would get a part of the elk. So the race occurred, and the sturgeon won. And so the sturgeon has brown cheeks that are very good, and a collarbone that is very good. So the sturgeon won.
There you go. Because the rest is white. That's right. Thank you. Thanks for indulging.
That's one of the stories that the elders shared with us.
I like it. And you can get both of those at the Brigham Fish Market when it's in season.
Can.
Okay.
You can't get the sturgeon cheeks, but you can get the sturgeon.
Not the elk, that's right.
No,
Joe,
not the elk either.
When you get a chance, if you'll pull up the PowerPoint. So the first thing I want to do is have you help us just get our bearings, because there's going to be a whole breadth of knowledge here. Some who are very familiar with Umatilla, where it is, some who this is going to be their first introduction. So do you mind, this is the logo.
That's our logo. It took us forever to get it, but we got it.
That's how logos always are, right?
And the logo is that 3 horses. I mean, and it's because there's 3 tribes. Whenever you see Confederated Tribes, it's always more than 1 tribe. And so the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation has the Cayuse, the Umatilla, and the Walla Walla. So that's why there's 3 horses to represent all 3 tribes. And our treaty was signed in 1855 on June 9th. And originally, when the treaty makers came to Walla Walla, they said they were going to do 2 treaties, one for the Nez Perce and one for the Yakima. On June 8th, the Cayuse, the Umatilla, and the Walla Wallas were getting ready to go to war because we weren't going to get our treaty. And originally, when we wanted our treaty, we wanted to have our homeland in La Grande. And they said, no, that was already set aside for settlers. And so we ended up at being the foothills of the Blues,
Let me show
which
you that.
is, and you'll also notice it's the smallest reservation. And so that's where we're located, just east of Pendleton, Oregon. We have 172 acres,
No.
1,000 acres,
Thank you.
sorry. And it's a checkerboarded reservation. And it's checkerboarded because of the Allotment Act. When it came, they said they gave each of us 80 acres, tribal members 80 acres, and whatever was left over, they sold to non-Indians. And so that's why we are I think we were the 24th checkerboarded reservation in the nation. So we have Indians and non-Indians who live on our reservation, but we manage our reservation because we were really lucky that we have an MOU with the Umatilla County where we do the planning together. So we're in Eastern Oregon, we're in Umatilla County, but as you can see in that map, we have usual custom areas in Oregon and Washington and Idaho.
We're going to come back to that more detail. Yeah, for some people that may be new phrasing.
Yeah, and we gave up 6.4 million acres when we signed our treaty.
So that's part of what you're seeing here. The lighter colors are what was the original territory. The darker versions are where the reservations are now.
Right.
So 6.4 million acres down to 172,000.
That's what we call the ceded area, and I have a map that we can share later. This shares our Aboriginal area. We traveled up into Washington, Idaho, California, and down the Columbia, where we gathered and practiced our traditions of gathering our first foods. And our first foods is our water, our salmon, our big game, roots, and our berries and medicines.
Do you want to talk about what that means when you say first foods?
Our first food, well, you can say it's two different ways. You can say it's our first foods, or you can say it's our traditional foods. And when we signed the treaty, our ancestors made sure that we had access to our traditional foods. And that was our water, salmon, big game, roots and berries, and our medicines. But we changed it for the Umatilla tribe, and I'm only speaking for the Umatilla tribe, we changed it to first foods because non-Indians began to understand that a little bit more. And now what we're doing now is we're looking at our planning. If we're gonna build a home here, a facility over here, we look at the impacts that it's going to have to our water, our salmon, our big game, our roots, and our berries. And if it's going to have a big impact, then we have to mitigate for that impact that it's having on our reservation. And so our first foods is very important. And it's also how we go to, 10 to 1, you guys haven't been to a longhouse ceremony, but at the ceremonies, we have women's foods and men's foods. But what happens is our water is served first on all of the tables, and then our salmon, and our salmon is salmon, eels, all the salmon, and then our big game is our elk and our deer, our buffalo. They're all kind of served out, and then our roots and our berries. And the men serve the men food, which is salmon and big game, and the women serve the berries and the roots. Roots and berries. Roots come first. And so we serve them in that order. And so that's why it's water, salmon, big game, roots and berries, and then water again. And in each feast or service, whatever we're having, we have what we say, chush. We say at the beginning and at the end of all our ceremonies. So it's a way of respecting our foods, a way of saying thank you for coming back, and it's our way to plan for the future in making sure those first foods are there for future generations. And we look at planning as, we don't look at it just next year, we look at it for 7 generations and beyond. And when I first started in, oh God,
How long ago was it?
It was a long time ago. When I first started, I used to drive my grandfather, Sam Cash, to the.
Wait, no, hold on. I should have known that you were gonna take whatever I'd planned and throw it out the window. Let me set this up a little bit better.
Okay.
You were just rolling right into a really important thing.
Okay.
So, Kat.
Okay.
Yes, we knew this
I'll
would
back
happen.
up.
You did not start out as a child saying, I want to go into government and politics.
Oh, heavens, no.
Yeah. So, can you share the story with us about how you first started getting introduced to all of the government side?
When I was small, my dad was a timber cruiser.
Yeah.
And we were out in the forest all the time.
What's a timber cruiser?
A person who evaluates the value of timber,
Okay.
looks. He used to draw all these cool maps that show, where you could harvest timber and all of that other stuff. And he was a great mathematician, and he was able to tell how much timber would be harvested there. And we just loved going out there in the mountains, because we'd spend all summer out in the mountains with the family, because he'd bring us out there. And so he asked me what I wanted to be when I was getting older, and I said, I want to be like you. I want to be a timber cruiser. He said, nope. And I said, why not? He said, there are no women timber cruisers. You can't be a timber cruiser. I said, so I have to be a nurse?
No offense to all the nurses.
No offense. But that's what my mom was. She was a nurse.
Okay.
And I really didn't want to be a nurse. But anyway, then my husband and I got married, and he brought me down to Cascade Locks. And quite frankly, I thought I was going to be there just for 1 year. 30-some years later, I moved back home. But during that time, I used to drive down to Portland to pick up my grandpa, who had flown to Portland, and drive him to meetings. And on the way to the meetings, I'd look at his papers and I ask him, why are you doing this? And how come we don't do this? And he'd answer my questions, and then we'd come out, I'd ask him again, how come this happened, and those types of things. So I was just asking him a lot of questions. And when I was in the meetings, I was against the wall. I was not at the table because I was Grandpa's driver. And so there was a vacancy on the Fish and Wildlife Commission, and my mom had told him, actually my husband, they had asked my husband if he would do it, and he said no way, he would not be on the Fish and Wildlife Committee. And they asked him why, and he says, because if they don't do what I want them to, I'll probably hit them. And so he said, no, I'm not a good politician. And quite frankly, I didn't think I was either. But anyway, my mom told my grandpa that. And as soon as he heard that story, he said, Kat should do it. And so I tell people I was drafted, because once my grandpa said I should do it, my mom, my mother-in-law, my family, all said I had to do it. And I remember sitting in General Council, and they said, who wants to be on the Fish and Wildlife Committee? And I'm sitting there. Not me. And then I got poked. Both sides, my mom and my mother-in-law jabbed me in the side, and I raised my hand. So, and that was August of 1976.
Okay.
It's a long time. I was figuring out, oh my God, I asked Grandpa, how long have you been doing this? And he said, for 80 years. And I said, there's no way. I'm not going to do this for 80 years.
So much for
or
that.
50 years, excuse me. He passed away when he was 80. He said 50 years. And I said, there's no way I'm going to do this for 50 years. Well, as you can tell, I'm over halfway.
Okay, so I want to mark that date. You said it's 1976. Okay, so you get on the Fish and Wildlife for the Umatilla, and a lot of other stuff is going on in the world in 1976. And I just want to backtrack a little bit because you just took off running with some really important details at the beginning, which is great. But I want to make sure it's clear that partly just for me too, this is how I learn, is some of the milestones. Like if we walk out of here tonight and you remember 1855 treaties, big deal in the Northwest for the tribes.
Huge.
So we log that. Part of what came out of that is seeding millions and millions of acres and different treaties going on with these 4 treaty tribes here in the basin. But one of the things that I learned when I was doing the podcast with Terry is that those treaties were different for every group, because it's different people, it's different locations. But there was one thing that was the same in all of them, and that was that the tribes reserved the right to fish and hunt and gather in their usual and accustomed places, which I actually... So this is, obviously, it was not typed up in 1855. This is so you can read it. This is the Umatilla Treaty. So this was the wording, and this is really important because it tells you a lot about the experience of the tribes on this land.
And it's really important because we live off the land. And, I can tell you a creation story, which I didn't tell you, but...
That's okay.
When we were created, the creator said, I'm going to make tribal people. And so they asked, and I'm not telling it exactly right, but I'll just give you a summary. They asked who would take care of the tribes. Salmon was the first to jump up, and that's why they're one of the first foods. And then it was big game, and then the roots and the berries. And when they said they would give themselves to us, they lost their voices. And so that's why we have to speak up for all the first foods, because they're not able to talk for themselves. But it's also important for you to know that these are foods from the land. So we live off the land, and it's our responsibility to take care of the land so the land can take care of you. Because if you don't take care of the land, one of the things I've asked many times is, how many of you can live without water? None of us can. Therefore, we need to take care of our environment so we have water, we have good air for our future generations, for our children's children. And there's part of them over there for me, for my family, but it's, as a tribal leader, my responsibility is to look at for all of our tribal members in planning for the future. And when I first started, the states and the feds would plan for 1 year because that's their budget cycle. And just not within this last decade, or maybe a little longer, Kurt could say, they're actually talking about generations now. The states and the feds are beginning to plan for future generations. So we've made a difference, but it was a long fight to get there.
We're on the same wavelength here, I think, right?
Okay.
You just set me up to set you up.
Yes.
Okay. Part of that long fight to get here, right, is so the treaties have been signed.
Right.
UNA rights are reserved. Great. You just can continue fishing and gathering and no problem, right?
Right. In the 1960s, we had 14 tribal fishermen file a suit in the federal court. And then later on, the 4 tribes came in, the Umatilla, the Warm Springs, Yakima, and Nez Perces. We all joined this case, and it was the U.S. v. Oregon case. And at that time, we were getting 13% of the salmon back into above the Bonneville Dam, which is
Do you want me, which photo did you like?
The map one, the
Oh,
map
okay.
one,
Got it.
which is just by the purple Warm Springs and Yakima boundaries. It's where Bonneville Dam's at.
Yeah.
Well, we were only getting 13% of the run back above Bonneville Dam.
Well, because part of it was, it used to be you guys were the main people fishing.
Right.
And then all of a sudden other people realized, oh, hey, look at this is pretty lucrative.
Yeah.
And then it was just,
Oh, damn. But then we got into the fish wars. And so in 1969, Judge Robert C. Baloney made a decision. He made two really important decisions. One is that the states could only regulate tribes for conservation. And two, the tribes were entitled to a fair share. In 1974, Judge Bolt adopted those same positions, except he put a number on it. He said they're entitled to 50% of the harvest, available harvest. And so Judge Baloney did the same. And it's really important for you to know that available harvest. When we go through the planning process, we look at, and I'm just going to use real simple numbers.
what are you trying to say?
There's 10 fish coming back. There's 5 that are needed for escapement. And so these other fish, 5, are going to be divided up 50-50. So 2.5 go to the states and 2.5 go to the tribes. And we as tribal leaders decide how that 2.5 fish are going to be harvested. And we have an order. First is for ceremonial purposes, then for subsistence, and then for commercial. So in the springtime, most of the salmon is gone for ceremonial, and then the summers go for summer commercial, subsistence and commercial, and then in the fall, which is the biggest season, as you guys all know, for subsistence and commercial as well. And so there's an order in which we do this, but we don't harvest salmon unless there's available harvest. But in the 69 and in 74, we were up until the late 80s, we were in court every year. I mean, every year. I remember going down to the Pacific Fisheries Management Council and I'm asking, how do you manage your seasons? And they says, well, we start on Memorial Weekend and we close on Labor Day weekend. And I asked why. And they said, because that's when people want to go fishing. What about the salmon? What are we going to do when there's no salmon? So we end up taking them to court, and we won several court cases. And so now seasons are set on the available harvest, not when we want it. Because quite frankly, when we set it when we want it, we'd be fishing all the time. And you would be too. But now we have to look at what's available, how are we managing for future generations? Because all of us want our children and our children's children to be able to fish. I remember in 2009, we went up and planted some fish in the Walla Walla Basin. And this elder man came up and he said, what are you guys doing? And we said, we're out planting some adult salmon on the Walla Walla Basin. Whoa, we were just amazed. He says, I used to fish here. My son hasn't been able to fish, but now maybe my grandchildren will be able to fish. And so in 2020, I think, oh God, I can't remember the year. But we had salmon coming back to the Walla Walla Basin. And we actually opened the season and we had our 3 salmon harvested. And the non-Indians came up to us and they said, can you give us a season? Can you open our season up? We said, no, the states have to open up your season because we don't have the authority to open up your season. The states have to do that. But we can open in our own seasons through our sovereignty process, to our own tribal regulations. And all of our seasons are adopted by our Fish and Wildlife Commission on an annual basis based upon the run sizes of our salmon, based upon hunting, herds, numbers, all of those things. We don't just do it just because we want to. We actually look at the numbers that are available. So we have technicians available now that we never used to have, and data is very important on how we move forward in managing our natural resources.
Will you real quick tell people about what's going on in this photo?
Oh, this is sturgeon.
Who's that handsome guy in the middle?
Oh, that's
No,
my,
not in the middle of them squat.
the one that's leaning down, that's my husband Robert. And then it's Thomas, and then their stepdad, Percy Brigham. So that's a set line catch, and it was off of, so down, I think those were at Celilo.
I can't believe you remember that.
Yeah.
A set
Yeah.
line. Will you explain what a set line is?
Yeah, we used to set line. The set line fishery is where these long lines are set, and every 15 feet there's another rope, and then it's a hook that's set on it, and so they're at the bottom of the river, and they're baited, and then they go out and run them, and they're able to catch some salmon. We now harvest sturgeon by set lines and by gill nets. So there's two ways to harvest sturgeon. But again, we work with the states, and we establish limits for each pool. John Day, the Dalles, and Bonneville.
Feel free to yell, Terry. I want to go back because you mentioned the fish wars, and we talked about Judge Bologna, we talked about the Bolt decision, but that's a big deal.
Oh, huge.
And I think when I was doing research for the podcast, that was one of the things that I was kind of like, wait a minute, this was in my backyard. And the way I understand it or think of it is that here, when nationally there was a huge movement for civil rights of a different kind, here in the Northwest, there was another movement for civil rights that was very directly related to this place. Mm-hmm. And the fish wars was ostensibly about how we manage fish, how we make sure there's enough, who gets what. But it was also about a lot of hard things happening.
There was a lot of hate. I'm just going to say it that way.
Go for it.
There was a lot of hard feelings. There was a lot of mistrust. There was a lot of disrespect. I walked, my husband and I and tribal leaders walked through picket lines that said, "Save the salmon, Cannon Indian, down with treaties, they're old, remove Judge Bologna. Bologna is full of baloney." So we walked through picket lines for that. And I remember one of the meetings, and I wasn't on the committee then, but I remember going into the meeting with my grandpa because I had driven him there. And we walked in, and there was this huge auditorium. And all the politicians were there, telling the Oregon and Washington Compact, who regulate seasons on the Columbia River, they were telling them that the treaties were old. These non-Indians need to be able to have their recreational and commercial fisheries. And there was just a small group of tribal people in the corner. And I got up, and this one lady kind of pushed me, and I turned around and I started to push her back, and my husband grabbed a hold of me and he said, "Look around." I was definitely outnumbered. So I sat down. But there was a lot of hard feelings then. My husband's boat was parked on the shore, and we came out one time, and it had 4 bullet holes in his boat. And we had to patch them back up. Our boats along the river used to get hoses cut, sugar in the tanks, tanks were stolen. I mean, there was just a lot of hard feelings. But you know, non-Indian fishermen today are very thankful to the tribal treaties, because if we hadn't fought for our treaty rights, our salmon would be worse off today than they are now. And some of the gill knitters especially have said, thank you for standing up. And I remember seeing this one cartoon. They were they were talking about somebody coming in and wiping out all the salmon, and the cartoon said, time for treaty right, people. But, you know, so we say our treaty is very strong and we stand on it, but we're also able to sit down and talk to people. We're able to say, how can we work together? I mean, specifically my tribe, we have done a lot through collaboration and partnership in working together. Oh, we always have that treaty right in our back pocket, but if we are able to move forward, we will do that. When I first started, we didn't have any salmon in the Umatilla River at all, none. And I seen a cartoon once, they're teasing me, and they said, yeah, look at the kind of fish you're gonna have to get up to the Umatilla River. It was a catfish with legs. And I said, it's not even a salmon. And they said, exactly. But at the same time, we were able to work together, because when we first planted coho salmon into the Umatilla River, that went out into the cornfields, and you know, the farmers, and we said we helped fertilize the farmers' crops because that's where our smolts went. But then we learned that, you know, we needed to screen the irrigation divisions on the Umatilla River, and when we looked at the screens, they were just like this, flat, and our smolts hit them, and there was a lot of mortalities. And so we developed rotating screens so that when the fish hit it, it went down, and the screens were rotating. And at the same time, the farmers got the water, and we were able to move our salmon down the Umatilla River. And I can't remember the year, but we got one salmon back. And when we got that salmon back, we debated on whether we should eat it or not, but we decided this is a year to celebrate. And so at our longhouse, we invited everybody who worked with us, and everybody got a little taste of that salmon. And the following year, we got 3. And so we were able to say, how many people can say they tripled their run size? But now we're averaging about 3,000 fish back to the Umatilla River, and we are, yes. And we share that 50-50 with Indians and non-Indians on the Umatilla River. So our success story is not just for us, it's for the people who depend on salmon. But at the same time, we recognize that our salmon and our water is important to all of us. And that's why we say collaboration and partnership. We have to figure out how to work together. And I'm really going to jump the gun on you on this one.
I mean, why stop, right? You're not going to go to the very end one, are you? You are. Okay, go for it, go for it.
When, and I've said this to my, our tribal youth, and that when I first started, we talked about treaty rights. And so that was my goal, was to protect our tribal treaty rights and to protect our fisheries for our children's children. Last year, Representative Simpson from the state of Idaho introduced legislation that said, look at the Columbia River Basin. I thought that was really interesting. And so now, we are looking at the Columbia River Basin as a whole. We know, and because we know nobody's going, we're all here to stay. And therefore, we need to figure out how to work together to protect the water, the farming, the irrigation, the hydropower, the recreation, and our salmon for future generations. And so our goal now is to figure out, how do we work together? How do we make things happen? And I think, many of us look at this and we say, I ask, quite frankly, are you part of the solution or are you part of the problem? And I know for the Umatilla tribe, we do not want to be a part of the problem. We want to find a solution. We want to figure out how all of us can live in the Columbia River Basin and survive, because we are here to stay. I have a joke. I'll be really frank, my mom was pretty prejudiced because of boarding schools, and I won't even get into that. But she was taken into boarding schools, and so when she came back, she was pretty prejudiced. And my dad, he was in boarding schools too. But there was just kind of a little bit of a difference. My dad, he learned how to survive and how to, I guess, I'll say survive. But my mom, she became very prejudiced. And so I remember when I was young, my mom and dad were arguing. And finally, my dad said, my mom was Naomi, but we called her Omi. And anyway, he finally said, Omi, they may have come over in a boat, but there's not a boat big enough to take them back. So you might as well learn to get along. And it took my mom a few years, but she began to get along. And I know when she passed away, she had a lot of friends, Indian and non-Indians, because of the relationship she built with them. So we all have to learn to figure out, how are we going to work together for the future of our children's children? Because we, quite frankly, are paying for the mistakes that our grandfathers made. Are we going to have our children pay for the mistakes we're going to make, or benefit from the work that we are doing together to help their future? So it's a lot of work, no doubt about it, but learning to work together, learning to listen to each other, and learning that when we do disagree, respectfully. And I know some people say we can't disagree disrespectfully, but I think we can. And we can figure out how to move forward, because we have to. It's our children's future depends on it. And you depend on it as well. So there's just a lot of things that, we have to figure out how to work together. So I really messed up your script.
You didn't. I knew what I was getting into with you. No, you didn't mess it up at all. But I would like to, since I have the photos here.
Okay.
And also to just sort of give people warning that I would like to, I think, open it up and have some time for conversation and questions. Mm-hmm. But before we do that, because I just think this is so friggin' adorable. So, first of all, we'll get to those two in a sec.
Okay, that's my daughter Terry over here.
This is Terry.
Kim.
There's Kim.
That's me.
Wait, what?
I said cutest one's on the left.
Cutest one's on the left. We'll talk about that too.
That's myself harvesting the sturgeon on a long line, and then my brother in the background.
That looks like some hard work there. God, Terry goes out in all rubber, plastic rain gear. You're just in a hoodie. All right. Tell me, and Elliot, I know that this is... Elliot's a little taller now, isn't he?
Okay, you should see Elliot and Terry stand up now.
Why don't you guys come here? Come here. This is my show, so I gotta pull you up to be a... So Elliot here, come over here. Elliot here. For those of you who have listened to the episode with Terry, Elliot got in on the action at the end. He was this adorable little boy, and he saw me with a microphone, and there's some very wonderful conversations. Do you remember what you said your nickname was at the time? Yes, you remember. I like it. And then he actually interviewed his mom. It's him talking to Terry at the very, very end. So since you guys are here, I feel like, okay, here's the cute one on the left. Come on, Kim. Get up here. And Charlie, you better put that phone down because you're next, okay? These are the Brigham daughters here. You want to talk about some power? So this is Kim. This is Charlie. So you've got Charlie, Kim, Terry, Elliot. You've got some women around you to deal with, don't you? So these are the kids.
Right.
Do you have any advice for raising daughters?
Be strict.
Okay. Thank you, guys. All right, a couple more photos, and then we're going to do questions. This is a beautiful photo of Kim and Terry fishing. Joe, if you don't mind bringing up the house lights, I want to go to some Q&A, and then any time along the way, I mean, you've done it to me, so you might as well do it to everyone else. If you want to add something unprompted, that's fine.
Okay.
I also want to give you a chance to, one of the things that I got to do with Kat, which was really great, is I went out and visited you, gosh, a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And the next thing I knew, we were cruising around the reservation in your car, and I was getting a guided tour. Mm-hmm. Learning a little bit more about what's going on out in Umatilla. And so you want to tell people to come out to the reservation, what might they see?
Well, I guess first of all, before we kind of get into that,
Okay.
I think one of the things you need to know is that our tribe has taken the position that we want to diversify our economy and to tell our story. And so this is Temescaluk, our museum telling our story. And when you go through the museum, you'll see it prior to treaty days, and then when the settlers came in, when the churches came in, and when you get to one section, you see the churches, and then you have two side doors. One is Catholic and one is Presbyterian, because when the religious people came in, they said our religion was not good, and therefore we needed to make a choice to be a Catholic or a Presbyterian. And so you'll make that choice, and then you'll go back on the other side, and then you'll see the boarding school days, and then you'll see our economy growing in the Umatilla Reservation.
Do you want me to show you?
So we have this is our casino. It's this weekend.
What?
It's the 28th anniversary.
This coming weekend?
This coming weekend.
With fireworks, right?
Fireworks. And on the Pendleton
Road trip, guys.
Reservation. And so we're going to have 28 years. And I got to tell you this story. When we first started working with the states and the feds, we'd say, we want to put fish back. We want to be able to work with you to put the fish back into our tributaries. And one of the guys came up and said, well, you can harvest your 50% right here. It was a hatchery. You can come harvest all your fish right here in front of this hatchery. And we said no, because you can't practice our culture, teach our language, our traditions. It all has to be in the tributaries. That's our usual custom areas. And so, but since we said no, we asked them to still continue to put fish back into our tributaries. And we would ask Oregon and Washington and Idaho, how can we help you get money to put, because they said, I remember one guy throwing up his hands like this, what is it you want? And we said, we want fish back in our tributaries. And he said, we don't have the money. We don't have the money to do it. And so, well, let us know how we can help you. Because we'll lobby for your money. And we got nothing. Then this started 28 years ago. 2 years after, when we started making money, they came up to, the states came up to us, okay, we want to work with you. Because we were putting money into our natural resources. Our biggest department in our whole organization is our natural resources department. And then, you know, we're just like the states and the feds, and the counties. We have an education department, health, and you'll see it, that's our Yellowhawk facility.
That's health.
It's our health facility, and that's 5 years old. And we saved up for that. And so we were able to construct it now, and we have a lot more things now than some of the counties do. But at the same time, we're in a partnership with Pendleton to work together. And I also have to let you know that when COVID got to all of us, we were called, Governor Brown called us and said, you have a COVID case in your casino. Oh my God, we figured, what now? So we immediately, this man had attended some basketball games in our school, and so we immediately closed down our school and our casino and our elders program, and we closed them down for 4 days so that people could go in and clean them. And you know, there was a lot of unknown things going on, but when we started getting the vaccinations, the tribe made the position that it's not going to be just for CTUIR members, because this is a tribal community, Indian and non-Indian. So we opened it up for anybody who lives on our reservation, anybody who works for us could come get a vaccination, a COVID shot. And we had people from Olympia, from Salem, and one guy who lived in Colorado, he almost made it. But then his wife found out he could get one closer.
He was rotating it. For anyone who's interested in learning more about what the Umatilla did, there is a sense of place from season 10, I think, with Chuck Sams, who's now our director of national parks, and was he board chair at the time?
No, he was our executive director.
Executive director. Chuck Sams from Umatilla, Emily Washines with Yakima gave a sense of place presentation on an indigenous response to the pandemic, because it's not the first pandemic that has been experienced by some people.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, and then I'll show one more thing, and then we'll do some questions.
Cayuse Holdings, we started this decades ago, but it's finally beginning to pay off. But it's a technical facility where it helps people learn, and we provide technical assistance. And we've got a number of substations across the United States. So it's beginning to make a profit. I mean, it took us a while, but we're getting there now.
Yeah, and other parts of the tour were, we got to see the transportation, kayak transportation.
Oh yeah, kayak. We have what we call kayak, and it's people can ride free from Walla Walla, Hermiston, LeGrand, we call the Mission, which is our reservation, to Pendleton, to the casino, wherever. I mean, we've got a schedule where people just have to learn about our schedule, and they can get on kayak and go back and forth. And we're also now looking, I think, at Boardman. So we're looking at expanding, because it's easy, but you know, you just got to know the schedule.
Okay, so I think I'm turned on. Nope, you don't like it?
No, it's not turned on.
It's red.
That button, it is red?
Yeah. Okay, I can do the other one too if you'd prefer. Check. Okay, that's okay. I'm gonna stick with the lock. Okay. And I bring this up just because it's so familiar here in the gorge. Housing for people who work on the reservation is being built.
Oh yeah.
Very familiar with that need for housing.
Yeah. We've been working on housing for decades, and we finally have a apartment unit where people are going to be able to rent apartments on our reservation and live on our reservation. And we're also planning, hoping to build additional homes on our reservation as well. And the other part of it is that, when these dams were built, we had a whole bunch of people living along the water. And so our villages and our home sites were covered, and they were never restored. And we had to fight with the Corps of Engineers for quite a while, but now they're finally understand. We said, why is it that North Bonneville, Arlington, Boardman can get their homes?
Boardman twice.
Huh?
Boardman twice.
Oh, Boardman twice, yeah. And North Bonneville twice, Why is it these people can get their homes? And we're not saying they shouldn't, but why is it that they can get their homes rebuilt and we have nothing? We have treaty fishing access sites and in-lieu sites on the Columbia River, but they are supposed to be temporary. And if any of you have been down there, they'll know that they're not temporary. And so we're working with the Corps and congressional representatives to try to get homes built on the Columbia River for tribal people, because they refuse to go to the reservation. And those are some of them.
Just trouble over there.
Interject real quick. Shadow Tribe. That book, Shadow Tribe.
Okay, since you said it, here, because you and I are on the same page about that. Terry has a book recommendation.
It's called Shadow Tribe, and it goes along with, sometimes for me it was really tough to read it sometimes. Baloney decisions, a lot of things that went on prior, leading you up to understanding that not all of us went back to the res. And
Right.
how, God, doesn't make me cry. You suck.
Let me punch you.
Yeah. But it tells the struggles of, reservation Indians on the river. So again, you suck.
Yeah, I think.
It's called Shadow Tribe.
Yep. What I liked about it, and you and I talked about when we talked, was that so often we sort of try to tell the story and break things down into boxes, and that's not actually how it was. So again, this topic is, it's not even a topic. This piece of our history is so much more complex. So we're going to keep trying to do our best to tell pieces of it through Sense of Place. All right, questions. I want to hear from you guys, and I will say, regardless if this is your first time and this is all new to you or you know a lot of it, no question is a bad question as long as it's thoughtful. So what do you want to know? And thanks for putting up with my little tiny mic.
Yeah, hi, Kat. Can you speak to the current situation with removing the lower Snake River dams?
Oh, wow. That's part of the Simpson proposal in looking at the Columbia River Basin as a whole. And what we're doing right now is we're recognizing that if the Snake River dams are going to be removed, we do need to do some planning. And it's not going to happen overnight, but we also recognize that there are Grand Coulee Dam, Hells Canyon. Those are dams that never had fish passage. And so we're looking at fish passage. We're looking at not only at fish passage, but we're looking at habitat, water quality, water temperature, all of those types of things to say, what do we need to do to rebuild salmon in the Columbia River? And if the Snake River dams are going to be removed, what do we need to do to replace the energy? How are we going to get transportation up, all of those things up to the Snake River that people are used to? So we're doing a lot of talking right now. We don't have a plan yet, but we're trying to figure out how to look at the Columbia River Basin as a whole.
All right. I'm happy to run around.
Yes, thank you for sharing all of your ideas and thoughts with us. I'm very curious about the intersection of forestry management because the Columbia River Basin as a whole includes an awful lot of forested lands, and the mismanagement of forest lands over many, many years, and how does that intersect with and affect the salmon and everything else that's going on? Because I'm very concerned about the direction that the Forest Service is going in a lot of their activities, and I'd like to know what you think about that.
Okay, I first I want to give you a little bit of background in that for the first time since I've been working for the tribe, we have federal agencies talking to each other. They're asking, what do we need to do to fulfill the federal trust responsibility to the tribes? And we're letting them know that, one, the forestry people need to step up and manage the forestry better because our soil is our future, not only for the forest, but for the farmers, for everybody. Because if you have good soil, you will have good water retention. And so we need to develop a plan. And what tribes say over and over is that we are all linked. I mean, so many times you hear about the salmon as a circle of life. We all have a circle of life, but we are all linked together, and so many times it's not pulled together. And so we're working really hard to get the forestry, U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Reclamation, the Corps, all the federal agencies, NOAA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, all of them to start talking together to say, how do we improve the ecosystem? I mean, in 1964, when the Columbia River Treaty was drafted, it was drafted for two reasons, flood control and power. And in 2013, the 15 tribes came together to say, you need to include ecosystem. But we're not just looking at along the Columbia River. We're looking at the headwaters of the Columbia River. And I know that for the Umatilla tribe, one of the things we adopted, what we call is a river vision. And Steve Wright, who used to be the BPA administrator, he came out and toured what we call the Meacham Creek. Because when the railroad came in, they wanted the railroad to go straight through our reservation on the east side of the mountain. And so they pushed dikes all the way through the Meacham Creek, and our river was pushed to the west side of the mountain. And so we started negotiating with the railroad, with the Forest Service, and conservation groups, everybody, and the states, and we developed a river vision. And so we removed some of those dikes, and when we removed them, we started creating a meandering river again. And it was really cool because when we went out there the first time, and it was great to see all the people out there picking all the salmon, all the living creatures in the water and putting them in buckets. And because they knew we were gonna put the water back over to a meandering stream. And so when that was all done, we closed that off and then it started doing meandering. We went back a week later and we seen springs pop up that we've never seen before in ages. And so we're working with the forestry to do better management. How do you plan for the future? I know it's been timber, let's harvest them. But it's not about just harvesting timber, it's about the healthy forest. And so we're working with them as well to try to get those things done.
Thank you. All right, who else? Who else?
I wanted to hear more about Inlu fishing villages, and I guess my question is that these are my neighbors and people living along the river, and I think my understanding is that this is where people want to live. The setting is underserved. I think that's an understatement. I don't think there's power or water there. And so what's the solution? Is there a solution for people to be able to live where they want to live in humane conditions?
Well, that's a tough one. I
Will
mean,
you real quick, just for folks who are not familiar with that phrase in loose sites, and just so you guys know, there's right across at the mouth of the White Salmon is one, for example, but maybe give another sort of little background to what it is.
the White Salmon River.
Yeah, that's
Well, there has been a lot of work in, removing the dam up there. And, there's in-loose sites that are there. And we are trying to figure out what is the best way to provide them the infrastructure that is needed for that area. We have no answers yet. But, at the same time, we are trying to find the solution as to what is it. Because, like I said, people are not moving. Therefore, we have to figure out how to make things livable. I don't know, we don't have the answers yet. But you got ideas, hey, we're willing to listen.
I just want to say, too, that is a topic that is on my radar to try to find the person or people who could come and tell us more and help us understand more of what's going on. So just stay tuned, because it's important to me as well. So, yes, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you just so much for coming and for the conversation. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your work at the federal level with on the Tribal Advisory Council, and kind of what, I don't know, opportunities or what are some of the priorities that you all are trying to discuss and move forward? Maybe what lessons from the Umatilla tribe you're carrying up to that level?
Well, I can tell you that I love to stir the pot. And I'm not afraid to ask questions. And being on this special tribal advisory committee, I'm looking forward to it. We haven't had any really meetings yet, but we are definitely going to be planning a couple of meetings this year. And I know it's, I've attended more meetings than I have ever had in the last, within the last year, simply because when I'm representing my tribe, I pretty much know who to go to and questions to ask, or those types of things. But when I'm representing tribes in Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, I pretty much know what Oregon and Washington wants, but I need to learn more about Idaho. And so I'm going to more tribal meetings now to gain more information, so that when we do have the meetings, I can maybe ask some questions. And like I said, I'm not afraid to ask questions, and I'm not afraid to stir the pot, simply because I think we need to have those open and frank discussions. And I did get one tribe from Idaho, this is what we want. But at the same time, I need to figure out what everybody else wants, so.
Do you want to at least tell her?
Huh?
Do you want to maybe give her the story about what you did with Secretary Haaland?
Oh, it's kind of embarrassing.
I know, that's why I'm bringing it up.
Well, we, in the last, in November 29th, we were invited back to DC to meet with Secretary Haaland and her staff. And so 24 of us went, the primary member and the alternate member. We all went back to DC, and we were at this reception. It was a meet and greet, and then everybody else came in. And so it was Christmas time. There was a Christmas tree right here. And so I walked by it, and Secretary Haaland was standing right there. And I walked down further, and oh, there's my alternate. So I grabbed him and I said, come on. And he said, let's get a picture with us and Secretary Haaland. And so we got together, and I handed my phone to the lady in front, and I said, would you please take a picture of us? And so we got a picture with the three of us. And then he went his way, and then I later ran into Chuck Sands, and I said, hey, Chuck, let's go get a picture with Secretary Haaland. We haven't done that. And he looks at me and he says, Kat, I said, what? Look at that line. I crowded in front of all of those people.
Total line cutter. So that's what she's done right now at the federal level. All right.
Oh.
It's the little button on top there.
I wanted to also thank you again for coming, and since today is International Women's Day, I was wondering if you would be willing to comment for us on some of the specific challenges that you've had as a woman in a position of power. We have probably 3 hours, I know, and then and maybe some of your some of the successes that you think maybe you were helped a little bit because you're a woman. If that exists, I have no idea.
Do you have 5 hours?
I do.
No, I'm joking. When my husband and I got married, I was kind of brought up traditionally, and the women stay home and cook, and I'll take care of the house and all of those things. When he brought me down to Cuskey Locks, he said, I want to teach you how to fish. I told him I'm not supposed to go fishing. And he says, I want to teach you how to fish. So I got on the scaffold and I learned how to fish. And then that fall, he brings me up to, we're going to go hunting. Wow, I'm not supposed to go hunting. And so I asked my granny and my mom and then my grandpa, okay, you can, but you can't do this, this, and this. You have to be careful. And so I was able to go hunting with my husband. And, that was the first time. I've killed deer, so I haven't killed an elk, though, but at the same time, I've been able to go hunting. And all my girls are hunters and fishers. But as a politician, I was just telling some people a while back, when I first started fishing with my husband, some of them are very traditional, and I walked down to the river, and the guys, no. So I turned around and I walked back, and I got in the car, and because they didn't want me to touch their boat, their gear, or their pickup. It was bad luck. And so I respected them, and so I sat back. But later, as I said, I became a fisher, and my girls and I, we were an all-girl crew, and we went out and we went fishing. But as a politician, I was at a meeting, and when this one man got up and he said, "You women don't belong here." And there was 3 women. And we are all officers of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. If you guys know where that's at, it's a formation of the 4 tribes. Then the office is in Portland, and Charlie is the executive assistant for the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. And anyway, this man said, "You women don't belong here." I went, whoa. The first 2 women got up and basically told him, we've worked hard. We work hard to represent our tribe and all of those things. And I got up and said, well, I probably wouldn't even be here if you men would speak up. So it's been tough, but at the same time, as Sarah is, I'm persistent. And so are my girls. We all are persistent in trying to get done what we want to get done. And as some of the feds in the state will know, that I don't give up very easily. And I can give you another story. In the 1980s, we had what we called a Northeast Oregon Hatchery Project, which was the Umatilla tribe, the Nez Perce tribe, and the state of Oregon. And we all agreed we were going to build a hatchery in Northeast Oregon. Well, the group kind of disbanded. And Gary James, who is our fish manager, he said, what are we going to do? And I says, we got to keep it up. So we kept at it, and we kept at it. In 2016, we finally got the funding to move forward for the Walla Walla hatchery. But it took forever, but we finally got our Walla Walla hatchery built. And that was from the 1980s. And in 2025, we're going to have adult fish coming back to the Walla Walla Basin. Yes. So sometimes you just can't give up. So that's what I've done.
I'm going to let you hear the rest of that clip that we played earlier.
Oh.
I wouldn't let you finish, okay?
Okay.
Because this is about a woman who you know, who is now doing the things that I guess the guys used to do. Are you ready for this, Joe? I think so. Okay.
I mean, just driving down I-84 and finally see the river, I was like, yeah, I love what I do. You know, everybody has a different place that they call home. I mean, I've been out in 0 degrees, the water hits my rain gear and freezes immediately. I've dislocated my shoulder out there. I've literally got my ass handed to me. I mean, I could have the shittiest fucking day in the world. And then I hit the water. And I don't care how bad, how rough it is, and how cold it is, and it's just, yeah, you're back here. This is where you belong.
That's Terry.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that I remember one day as the men were telling me that we can't do this. And I was trying to let them know that, because we were fighting with the states and the feds. I was telling them, you know, we've written this letter to them. And we have to be able to say 1, 2, 3, 4. This is why we're objecting. And they said, no, we've already written a letter. They've read the letter. And I said, well, there's a meeting tomorrow that we have to say what they're going to ask us. And they said, no. And I said, I was really upset because they weren't listening. And I got home and I told my husband, I need to go to the river. So we went out and we took a boat ride, and it was really relaxing. And after getting out there, I said, this is what I'm fighting for. This is why I am here, is to try to bring our fish back to the Columbia River, and you can't give up. So going to the river, going to the mountains is a good memory to remember why you're there. So, and I know my girls do it all the time, and my grandchildren will probably do the same thing, but I hope all of you will look at everything that you're looking at and say, this is why you're here. This is why we need to be working together for the future of our grandchildren and our children's children. So hopefully we are all part of the solution and working together for the Columbia River Basin as a whole. Because like I said, we're not going anyplace.
Thank you. I want to, before you go, I want to give a couple nuts and bolts final close-up stuff, and then I want to come back to you. And I would love to just hear from you as you send out this audience of people to share what they heard tonight. What would be the thing that you would want them to take with them and share? Or what is something about the river that you maybe see in a way that we haven't, that you could change how we see it. So think on that
Okay.
for a second, okay? While she thinks, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I also want to thank on behalf of everyone who are here at a Souser, who you guys probably met on the way in, and the volunteers who help us out each month. I want to thank Joe Garut and Big Britches. Thank you, Joe. He helps us run our live stream and do all the AV pieces that we need. Kyle Ramey, our photo ninja. Do you have any special requests for the?
John Travolta.
Oh, this kind of move this time.
Like that.
Okay. The Best Western Hood River is an awesome partner when we say we have someone coming from out of town and we would love to be able to not have to send them home late at night. They give us a room, so they're giving her a room tonight. Dog River Coffee, again, the chairs, thank you. Matt and Meredith, the table, thank you. These are my flowers from my birthday. Thank you, Kristen. It takes a village, people. Thank you to the daughters and the grandson. It's good to see you. They brought salmon dip and crackers out there. If you didn't get some, please do. And then go see them at Brigham Fish Market. And then one last thing before I come back to you. Some of you guys know we've had lectures and there's been a podcast on Minoru Yasui, who is a Hood River boy and is the one and only Presidential Medal of Freedom winner ever awarded to an Oregonian. And Maya Yasui reached out to let me know that they're having an event coming up on Saturday, April 1st. It's in Portland. I put some info out there, but it's celebrating his legacy. It'll be in Portland. All the details are here. If you don't know Minoru's story, I hope that you just go Google him tonight, because he was born and raised here in Hood River and is another very important leader that we are connected to. I think.
Here on April 15th, there's another.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. I'm adding that to your list. Next month is our very last Sense of Place of the season. It is a tale of magma and water, which I love because I think of the Northwest as this Garden of Eden, because it's always often talked about that way. And next month we are going to hear from someone who goes way back before that time and shows us how volcanoes and water have created this place. So that is next month. And now, what's your final thoughts? This is your chance.
Don't be afraid of us. I mean, tribal people are people, and we want to plan for our children. And I've had so many instances where people are just afraid of a tribe. And yeah, some of us are tough. I'm not going to lie about it. Some of us are really tough, but at the same time, we're fighting for our future. So I think, just learning to outreach to us and ask us, what can we do? How can we work together? Is something that everybody needs to keep in mind. And as for the land, the water, the air, the environment overall, we need to take care of it. Because I can tell you some of the stories on the Columbia River. When Celilo was there, our tribal people had a dipper that was right next to the scaffold. And whenever they were thirsty, they would take that dipper and just dip it into the Columbia River and drink it. Will you drink it? Yeah. See how much water, how much change has occurred in that Columbia River? You can't even see through it in some places. And so that's what we want to change. We want to make the environment better. We may not be able to drink it, but we want to be able to say it's good water, good air, good land. And so we have a common goal, but we're not going to be able to work together unless we learn to respect each other and listen to each other and work together to find a solution. So don't be afraid of us. But like I said, some of us are going to be tough. And I'll give you a short story.
Let's do it.
Just a short story. When we were going through the fish wars, one of the gillnet fishermen, he came up to me and he says, "Can I come to your Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission?" And I asked him why. He said, I just want to talk. And so we were actually hosting the meeting at our museum at Temescalek. And he came in and he sat down and he explained that I want to work with you. I know treaty rights are important on the Columbia River, and I want to work with you. Man, did he get blasted. Because you took the fish before it reached us, you didn't listen to us, and you're mean to us, and now you want us to be nice to you? And he took an ear beating. I mean an ear beating. And then I walked out, and he said, "How did I do?" I said, "You did very good." I says, "Because we need to let it go. We have been mistreated, we have been abused, and we have been told no more than once. And so when you can take it and understand what we've gone through, then we can start working together." And he did. He came back and we worked together. And I can tell you many stories about tribes being told no, just for simple things. But at the same time, we want to work together. And like I said, some of us will be tough, and some of us will be ornery, but at the same time, be patient with us, because we've got a lot of history, a lot of forgiving, a lot of work we need to be doing together. And some of us have gone past it, but at the same time, we have to work together. And I can tell you for decades, and I mean decades, there are 15 tribes above Bonneville Dam. And for decades, we didn't get along because residents fish versus salmon. And then when we started talking about the Columbia River Treaty, we stayed focused on the Columbia River Treaty. And because we stayed focused on the Columbia River Treaty, we now have environment added to the Columbia River Treaty negotiations.
There's hope.
There's hope.
Yeah.
There's always hope. So don't give up. Continue to outreach and work with us. And I know for the Umatilla tribe, we will do it. We will work with you. We're looking for that partnership.
Come here. Okay, come on. Thanks for helping make that happen. Thank you, Kat. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next month. Oh,
I forgot the map.
we'll go outside and hand them out. You crack me up. Thank you all. We'll see you next month.